the golden cage, why success feels empty, and how to find true peace, the architecture of modern isolation and the digital landscape. 1. The paradox of the hyperconnected era. We are currently navigating the most intricately interconnected era in the entire narrative of human civilization, yet we are simultaneously drowning in an unprecedented ocean of psychological isolation. This is the profound, defining paradox of the 21st century. At no other point in history has a species possessed the structural capacity to transmit thought, imagery, and emotion across thousands of miles in a fraction of a millisecond. We have systematically rewired the physical topography of the planet with fiber optic cables, satellite arrays, and cellular towers designed for the sole purpose of eliminating distance. A human being sitting in a remote village can instantly witness the live movements of an individual walking down a neon-lit avenue halfway across the globe. We have collapsed the boundaries of time and space to ensure that no one ever has to experience the structural reality of physical detachment. Yet, beneath this massive, multi-trillion-dollar architecture of technical synthesis, an alarmingly quiet crisis of the human spirit is unfolding. The more efficiently we link our systems, the more completely we seem to disconnect from the fundamental essence of our own existence. This is not a casual coincidence. It is a structural consequence. The modern manifestation of loneliness is unique to our contemporary digital age. It does not resemble the historical solitude of an ancient ascetic seeking spiritual clarity in a desert cave. Nor does it look like the physical separation of a medieval traveler exploring uncharted territories. Instead, it is a heavy, hollow, and deeply suffocating ache that materializes precisely when we are surrounded by the highest volume of virtual inputs. It is the specific form of exhaustion that settles deep into the chest after spending hours scrolling through an endless, automated procession of curated lifestyles, professional triumphs, and synchronized social updates. It is the realization that despite consuming an immense digital feast of human faces, names, and text blocks, our internal awareness remains entirely unnourished, empty, and stranded in a frozen orbit. We find ourselves existing within a civilization populated by billions of individuals who are physically adjacent but emotionally invisible to one another. You see this phenomenon play out daily in the public squares of our great cities. It is present in the crowded subway car where 50 individuals stand shoulder to shoulder in absolute silence, their bodies swaying in unison with the movement of the train, while their eyes and minds are completely captured by the tiny, glowing rectangles held in their palms. It is present in the bustling urban cafe, where friends sit at the same table, yet choose to commune with notifications rather than the living, breathing entities sitting 2 feet away from them. It is present within the absolute stillness of millions of modern bedrooms, where the silence is broken only by the rhythmic clicking of keyboards and the soft hum of cooling fans. We have constructed a world where we are universally visible but profoundly unknown, standing in a massive, crowded digital coliseum where everyone knows our username but no one understands our heart. 2. The mechanics of the digital mirage. To understand how we arrived at this state of systemic alienation, we must carefully dissect the daily localized rituals that define our relationship with technology. Consider the specific scene that transpires in countless dark rooms across the globe every single night. The external world has grown quiet, the obligations of the daylight hours have concluded, and the physical body is resting on a mattress, yet sleep remains entirely elusive. The mind is restless, vibrating with the residual momentum of a day spent absorbing fragmented data streams. Instinctively, without a conscious decision, the hand reaches toward the nightstand. The fingers wrap around the smooth polymer and glass chassis of a smartphone. With a brief touch, a sharp cold blue luminance erupts from the screen, instantly bathing the human face in an artificial glow. In that exact microsecond, a profound metaphysical shift occurs. The individual is effectively severed from the physical reality of the room they inhabit. The dimensions of the bedroom, the shadow of the curtains, the cool texture of the air, and the rhythmic sound of their own natural breathing all dissolve into insignificance. The user's consciousness is forcefully pulled through the glass portal and cast into a vast, ungrounded digital ether. They begin to glide through an endless scroll of human artifacts, They witness the immaculate frames of a distant acquaintance's tropical vacation, where the ocean appears impossibly turquoise, and the smiles seem completely immune to internal conflict. They slide past a colleague's enthusiastic announcement of a corporate promotion, complete with industry buzzwords and a flood of congratulatory metrics. They view the polished, magazine-perfect portrait of an old high school friend's recent engagement, staged against a sunset that looks intentionally color-corrected by an algorithm. Each piece of content is a highly processed monument to a life lived fully, smoothly, and without the friction of human doubt or daily suffering. In an effort to participate in this synthetic ecosystem of validation, the user engages in the automated currency of the platform. They double-tap the screen to leave a heart. They type out a brief, superficial comment populated by standardized emojis. They may even decide to contribute their own offering to the digital gallery, a carefully selected, heavily filtered photograph from a past moment where they appeared genuinely happy, unbothered, and successful. For a fleeting instant, a surge of chemical validation satisfies their awareness as the first notifications begin to appear. The red counter rises, confirming that their digital avatar has been witnessed, approved, and stamped with legitimacy by the network. But the precise moment the device is laid face down onto the wood of the nightstand, the illusion shatters with brutal velocity. The blue light disappears, and the returning silence of the physical room crashes back over the individual with a weight that feels far more oppressive than before. The digital mirage evaporates into the darkness, leaving behind a deep, echoing sense of lack. The mind is forced to confront the stark, unedited reality of its own immediate presence. In the quiet space between the digital high and the physical calm-down, a terrifying question inevitably arises from the depths of the psyche. Among these hundreds of digital witnesses who have liked my reflection, does a single human being actually comprehend the raw, messy, and unvarnished truth of my existence? This specific cycle plays out millions of times every night, acting as a universal, standardized engine of modern emotional isolation. 3. The quantitative metrics of disconnection. The depth of this contemporary crisis is not merely a subjective feeling or an abstract philosophical complaint. It is a measurable structural reality supported by staggering quantitative data. When we examine the sheer volume of data currently flowing through our global communication networks, it becomes clear that we have completely outsourced the human act of communion to automated algorithmic platforms. Every 24 hours, human beings transmit over 60 billion text messages through single messaging applications. Every month, over 4 billion hours of video content are uploaded to public video sharing platforms, creating an incomprehensible archive of human sight and sound that would take multiple lifetimes to consume. Every single day, close to 100 million carefully edited photographs are cast into the social media ecosystem, accompanied by billions of automated expressions of approval. We have achieved a state of technical omniscience where we can track the microscopic updates of a casual acquaintance's life with absolute precision. We know what restaurant they visited, what food they consumed for lunch, what consumer goods they recently purchased, and what political opinions they chose to broadcast to the public sphere. We are flooded with information about humanity, yet we are completely starved of the actual experience of human connection. The public spaces that historically served as the foundational grounds for organic community have been systematically evacuated of human presence. Consider the systemic transformation of our daily environments. The commute. Public transit systems move millions of individuals through urban centers in a state of absolute, self-imposed isolation. 50 people sit in an enclosed space, their physical bodies practically touching. Yet they remain completely sealed off from one another, staring fixedly into their personal screens, communicating with entities who are absent while fundamentally ignoring the living, breathing human beings who are present. The neighborhood. The organic social fabric of localized neighborhoods has dissolved. We possess the capacity to live for years in a residential complex without ever engaging in a meaningful, unscripted conversation with the individual who resides 3 feet away on the other side of the hallway wall. We can track the global movements of an online influencer, but we do not know the name, the sorrow, or the history of our immediate neighbor, the intimate gathering. Even our most sacred, intimate social rituals have been completely colonized by digital mediation. Walk into any restaurant and observe family dinners where multiple generations sit at a single table in physical proximity, yet exist in entirely separate, non-communicating virtual worlds. Observe birthday celebrations where the central event is experienced, not through the unmediated clarity of human sight, but through the small glass lenses of multiple recording smartphones, as if the value of the lived moment is entirely non-existent unless it can be preserved as a piece of digital content for an anonymous future audience. We are photographed, tagged, logged, mentioned, and monitored continuously, yet we carry a profound aching sense of being utterly invisible. For the currency of external validation, in this environment of continuous digital surveillance, we have inadvertently transformed ourselves into the permanent marketers of our own identities. Because the platforms we inhabit are built upon quantified metrics likes, followers, shares, and comments, we have trained our minds to perceive the world not as a place to be experienced, but as an endless source of raw material for content creation. We have built digital avatars that serve as pristine highlight reels of our existence, carefully selecting our most aesthetic angles, our most intellectual thoughts, and our most celebratory moments while ruthlessly purging any evidence of confusion, grief, vulnerability, or mundane reality. This constant maintenance of a public persona requires an immense, continuous expenditure of psychological energy. It forces the human mind into a state of perpetual split awareness. When you are standing before a beautiful sunset, walking through a quiet forest, or experiencing a tender moment with a loved one, a segment of your consciousness is instantly detached from the immediate experience and forced to evaluate it from an external perspective. How can this moment be captured? What caption will optimize its performance? How will the network respond to this representation of my life? The unmediated experience of reality is systematically sacrificed for the sake of its digital representation. The long-term psychological consequence of this behavior is catastrophic. By continuously feeding our curated digital reflections with attention, we cause our true, unedited inner selves to atrophy from neglect. We begin to mistake the avatar for the entity. We experience a superficial surge of self-worth when our digital persona receives a high volume of metric validation. But because that validation is directed at an edited, idealized fiction rather than our actual flawed human reality, our deep internal self remains entirely untouched. We intuitively realize that the network does not love us. It merely loves the performance we have constructed. Therefore, we find ourselves trapped in an exhausting cycle. We receive hundreds of digital interactions on our birthdays from individuals who possess zero understanding of our actual lives. Yet when we encounter a genuine crisis of the soul, we look at our list of thousands of digital contacts and realize we cannot find a single human being we feel safe calling to confess our raw, uncurated suffering. The psychological mechanics of distraction. 1. The neurobiology of the loop. The compulsive behavior that drives our continuous engagement with digital screens is not a simple failure of personal willpower or a casual character flaw. It is the direct result of highly sophisticated neurobiological manipulation. The digital platforms that dominate our contemporary life are engineered by some of the most advanced software designers, behavioral economists, and neuroscientists on the planet. These systems are intentionally built to bypass the rational defenses of the prefrontal cortex and directly exploit the primal reward pathways of the human brain. The primary mechanism utilized by these platforms is the variable reward schedule, which is the exact psychological engine that fuels slot machines and severe gambling addictions. If an individual interacts with a system and receives the exact same reward every single time, the novelty quickly fades, and the behavior eventually stops. However, if the reward is entirely unpredictable, if the user never knows whether their next action will yield a massive burst of social validation, or absolutely nothing, the brain enters a state of hyper-attentive anticipation. When you lift your smartphone and refresh your social feed, your brain produces a distinct spike in dopamine, the neurotransmitter responsible for desire, anticipation, and search behavior. The dopamine is not released when you actually receive a satisfying piece of information. It is released in the anticipation of what might be there. The infinite scroll mechanism is specifically designed to maximize this effect. There is no natural endpoint, no page boundary, and no structural pause. The user is allowed to pull down on the screen indefinitely, with each gesture acting as a pull on a digital slot machine handle, driven by the frantic, unconscious hope that the next item will provide the ultimate chemical relief for their underlying restlessness. Over time, the brain becomes habituated to these rapid, intense bursts of neurochemical stimulation, leading to a structural downregulation of dopamine receptors. Consequently, the ordinary, slower, and less intensely stimulating experiences of physical reality, such as reading a book in silence, watching the rain fall, or engaging in a slow conversation, begin to feel intolerably boring and painful. 2. The ancient metaphor of the hungry ghosts. This modern state of systematic neurochemical compulsion finds a stunning, highly accurate mirror in an ancient spiritual metaphor developed 2,500 years ago. Within the Buddhist cosmological framework, the realm of the pretas, or hungry ghosts, in traditional Eastern iconography, these entities are depicted as tragic, tormented beings characterized by gargantuan, distended, and entirely empty bellies, but paired with completely narrow, elongated throats that are no thicker than the diameter of a single needle. The curse of the hungry ghost is defined by an absolute structural incompatibility between desire and consumption. They wander through the landscape in a state of perpetual, agonizing starvation, driven by an insatiable urge to devour anything they encounter. Yet, because their throats are so impossibly thin, they can never pass enough substance down into their massive bellies to achieve a state of satiety. If they discover water or food, the moment it touches their lips, it frequently transforms into ash, fire, or sand, intensifying their torment and leaving them more desperate than before they began to consume. When we step back and objectively observe our modern relationship with digital technology, it becomes clear that we have structurally engineered a civilization of hungry ghosts. Our deep internal loneliness is the massive, empty belly. Our rapid, surface-level digital interfaces are the needle-thin throats. We check our digital devices on average 96 times a day, which equates to once every 10 minutes of our waking lives. 96 times a day, we reach out with our thumbs, driven by an involuntary, compulsive hunger for connection, for validation, for the fleeting reassurance that we matter, that we are seen, and that we are alive. Yet, each time we consume a like, a comment, or a view, that digital input transforms into ash the moment it enters our psyche. It fails to reach the deeper layers of our soul, because a pixelated metric is fundamentally incapable of nourishing a biological, spiritual entity that requires authentic, vulnerable presence. We consume dozens of notifications and still put the device down, feeling an acute, hollow ache in the center of our being. This is the tragic cycle of the modern pretas. We are feeding the wrong part of ourselves with a substance that cannot satisfy, trapped in a loop where our very attempts to heal our thirst only ensure that we become more desperately dehydrated. 3. The eradication of solitude and the rise of anxiety. The systematic elimination of empty space from human life has had a catastrophic impact on the architecture of the human psyche. Historically, prior to the arrival of ubiquitous digital networks, the daily life of a human being was naturally punctuated by regular intervals of enforced silence and absolute solitude. There were natural boundaries built into the fabric of the day. The long walk home from work through quiet streets, the period spent waiting on a bench for a train to arrive, the moments of stillness before sleep, the hours spent performing manual labor without an auditory accompaniment. These intervals were not perceived as empty, wasted time. They were the essential, sacred clearings in which the human mind could process its experiences, integrate its emotions, and organize its internal household. They allowed the psychological debris of daily life to settle to the bottom of the awareness, leaving behind a clear, unclouded pool of consciousness. In our contemporary world, we have systematically targeted and eradicated every single one of these natural clearings. We have developed a profound, collective intolerance for the experience of unstimulated space. The moment a human being encounters a modern clearing, whether it is waiting 30 seconds for an elevator to descend, standing in line for a cup of coffee, or sitting at a red light in a vehicle. A wave of nervous, twitchy anxiety immediately ripples through the nervous system. The hand moves automatically to the pocket, extracts the device, and plunges the mind into a fresh stream of distraction. The consequence of this continuous self-sedation is a dramatic escalation in clinical anxiety and depression worldwide. By filling every microsecond of our lives with external inputs, we prevent our internal emotional processing systems from performing their vital functions. The grief that we haven't wept out, the anxieties we haven't integrated, the identity crises we haven't faced. All of these elements are continuously pushed beneath the surface of our awareness by the weight of incoming data. We are running away from our own minds, terrified of what we will find if we are left alone in a quiet room with our own consciousness. No wonder we feel so fragmented, exhausted, and profoundly homesick. We have spent years refusing to look our own soul in the eyes, choosing instead to outsource our entire mental life to an external algorithmic machine. The core concepts of Buddhist psychology. 1. The island of self Atadipa, in the twilight of his physical existence, as he prepared to abandon his mortal form under the twin sal trees. The historical Buddha was surrounded by disciples who were weeping bitter tears of grief, terrified of the impending loss of their master, and the guide who had illuminated their spiritual path. In response to their profound anxiety and their fear of being left completely stranded in a chaotic world, the Buddha did not offer a complex theological doctrine or a promise of divine intervention. Instead, he uttered a radical, concise phrase that remains one of the most revolutionary spiritual directives in human history. Atadipa viharatha, atasarana ananasarana. Translated from the ancient Pali, this command states, live as an island unto yourself, taking refuge in yourself, taking refuge in no external authority. To fully comprehend the depth of this concept of the island of self, we must visualize the metaphor through the lens of ancient geography. Imagine a vast, turbulent, and unpredictable ocean, swept by violent monsoons, shifting currents, and hidden reefs. A human being cast into this sea is entirely at the mercy of the elements, endlessly tossed about by the waves, exhausted by the continuous struggle to keep their head above water. In this context, an island is a monumental reality. It is a solid, unmoving mass of earth and rock that rises directly out of the ocean floor, breaking through the surface of the water to create a stable, protected domain of dry land. No matter how violently the waves crash against its shoreline, the core of the island remains absolutely immovable, grounded and secure. The Buddha's teaching is a direct recognition that the external world, with its shifting social opinions, its cultural pressures, its financial fluctuations, and in our contemporary era, its digital metrics, is a highly turbulent ocean. If you build your sense of identity, security, and worth upon this external landscape, you are choosing to live as a drowning swimmer, permanently vulnerable to the next wave of validation or rejection. To construct the island of self means to systematically shift the foundational anchor of your existence from the external world to the deep internal space of your own unedited consciousness. It is a declaration that your fundamental legitimacy as a living being does not depend upon the approval of an audience, the number of digital notifications you receive, or the validation of any external authority. It is the realization that you contain within your own immediate being a solid, unmoving sanctuary of awareness that can never be reached, modified, or damaged by the storms of the external world. 2. Radical presence over performance. This psychological framework requires an absolute, non-negotiable transition from a life of performance to a life of presence. Modern consumer culture is explicitly structured around the idealization of performance. It demands that we continuously convert our internal experiences into visible external assets. We are trained to treat our lives as raw materials that must be mined, shaped, and polished for the appreciation of an external market. This behavior effectively alienates us from the raw reality of our own existence. We become the spectators of our own lives, observing our actions through the imagined eyes of a public audience rather than directly feeling them from the interior of our own skin. Buddhist psychology offers a direct, unyielding antidote to this alienation through the cultivation of radical, unmediated presence. To be present means to completely strip away the layer of mental commentary, evaluation, and performance, and to plunge the consciousness entirely into the raw, immediate texture of the current moment. It means inhabiting your life from the inside out. When you are drinking a cup of water, you are not thinking about how to photograph the cup or describe the experience to an online community. You are simply experiencing the cold temperature of the liquid as it flows over your tongue, the physical movement of your throat as you swallow, and the deep sensation of hydration as it enters your biological system. This state of presence is fundamentally non-performative. It is entirely anonymous, silent, and invisible to the external world. It cannot be quantified by an algorithm. It cannot be shared across a network, and it cannot be converted into social capital. Yet, it is within this exact space of unstaged presence that true human freedom and happiness reside. When you choose presence over performance, you refuse to allow your life to be hollowed out into a series of public exhibits. You reclaim the absolute sovereignty of your immediate experience, choosing to truly live your life rather than merely broadcasting an idealized representation of it to a distracted world. 3. The reintegration of the mind-body continuum. A foundational pillar of this spiritual homecoming is the systematic healing of the violent fracture that modern technology has created between the human mind and the human body. In our hyper-digitalized existence, we live predominantly as disembodied entities. We spend 8 to 12 hours a day seated in front of digital workstations or staring into handheld devices, completely oblivious to the physiological reality of our physical frame. Our consciousness is concentrated entirely within the analytical, thinking mind, while the body is treated as nothing more than a passive, inconvenient vehicle designed to carry the brain from one meeting to another. This profound state of disembodiment is a primary breeding ground for modern anxiety, depression, and loneliness. The body is the natural repository of our animal intelligence, our emotional processing systems, and our immediate connection to the physical world. When the mind operates in a state of total detachment from this physical foundation, it becomes hyperreactive, spinning out into endless loops of abstract worry, existential dread, and narrative paranoia. It loses its grounding anchor and becomes entirely vulnerable to the chaotic currents of the digital information field. The practice of mindfulness is, at its core, a systematic methodology for the reintegration of this mind-body continuum. It is the process of intentionally dropping the elevator of your awareness down from the crowded, noisy penthouse of the analytical mind and allowing it to rest within the deep, spacious basement of the somatic body. When you bring your attention down into your physical form, feeling the weight of your bones pressing into the chair, the expansion of your ribcage, the tingling sensation in the palms of your hands, the solid contact of your feet upon the floor, you are returning your consciousness to its natural biological home. The body does not exist in the past, nor can it travel into the virtual future. The body can only ever exist in the absolute immediacy of the here and now. Therefore, by anchoring your awareness deeply within your somatic experience, you instantly pull your mind out of the digital illusions of the screen and ground it in the indisputable reality of the present. This somatic anchoring acts as a natural governor on the nervous system, downregulating the sympathetic fight-or-flight response, soothing the hypervigilance induced by continuous notifications, and creating a profound, unshakable baseline of internal safety and peace. The practical path of mindful returning. 1. The anatomy of a single conscious breath. The practical methodology for establishing this inner sanctuary does not require you to undergo an elite initiation, read dense academic treatises, or escape to an isolated monastery in the mountains. The supreme technology of human liberation is already built directly into your biological hardware, available to you at any second of your life without cost. The simple act of breathing with absolute awareness. To fully appreciate the power of this practice, we must deconstruct the intricate physical and psychological anatomy of a single conscious breath. Let us walk through this process with total precision. The initialization. You choose to interrupt the momentum of your current activity. You do not check your device. You do not complete the next task. You do not look at a screen. You allow your eyelids to softly close, or you simply let your gaze drop to a fixed, unmoving point on the floor before you. You bring the entire spotlight of your human attention to the tip of your nose. The inhalation. You begin to draw breath into your body. As the air passes through your nostrils, you become intensely aware of its specific physical characteristics. You feel the distinct coolness of the stream as it brushes against the membranes of your nose. You trace its downward trajectory through your throat, down into your trachea, and into the delicate networks of your lungs. You watch with unblinking internal awareness as your chest expands, your intercostal muscles stretch, and your diaphragm descends, gently pushing your abdomen outward. You do not manipulate the breath, you simply bear witness to it. You are completely present for the entire duration of the rise, realizing with absolute clarity. Inhaling, I am entirely aware that I am inhaling the zenith. At the apex of the inhalation, there exists an extraordinary microscopic point of absolute stillness. The inward movement has concluded, but the outward movement has not yet initiated. For a fraction of a second, the universe stands completely still. There is no doing, no striving, no performance, just pure, unadulterated existence. You rest your awareness inside this clearing of absolute silence. The exhalation. The body naturally begins to release the air. You trace the upward movement of the breath as your abdomen falls and your chest gently collapses. You feel the warm air passing back out over your upper lip. With this release of physical substance, you consciously direct your nervous system to let go of any accumulated psychological debris. You feel the tension draining out of your shoulders, the muscles of your jaw softening, and the tiny micro-expressions of stress dissolving from the skin of your forehead. You follow the exhalation completely until the very last molecule of air has departed your body, realizing. Exhaling. I am entirely aware that I am releasing this breath, the nadir, at the absolute bottom of the exhalation. Before the next breath arises, you encounter a second point of profound emptiness. It is a moment of total surrender, a clean slate, a temporary death of the ego narrative. In this space, you are completely free from the weight of your history, your obligations, and your digital identity. You are simply a localized point of pure awareness resting in the universe. From this space of absolute emptiness, the next breath naturally arises on its own, a beautiful gift of life that requires zero effort from your part. To complete this cycle just once with total, unbroken presence is to perform a profound act of self-reclamation. You have successfully broken the chain of automated conditioning that links your mind to the external digital machine. You have returned to the true center of your own existence, establishing a localized zone of absolute peace that cannot be contaminated by the noise of the world. 2. Walking as an act of liberation. This quality of radical presence must not be confined to a static sitting posture. It must be brought down into the active movements of our daily lives, transforming our routine physical transitions into powerful acts of liberation. Consider how we typically walk through the world in our hyper-connected culture. When we step out of our residential front door to walk to our vehicle, or when we traverse the distance between a parking garage and our workplace, our physical movement is completely automated and unconscious. Our bodies are moving across geographical space, but our minds are entirely elsewhere, either trapped in abstract projections of the upcoming day, or physically compromised by a smartphone held before our eyes as we walk, stumbling blindly across the concrete, while our awareness is immersed in a text chain or a social feed. We treat the physical act of walking as an inconvenient, blank space that must be crossed as quickly and thoughtlessly as possible to reach a destination. The practice of walking meditation, as beautifully articulated by modern mindfulness masters, completely reverses this dynamic. It transforms every step you take into an explicit homecoming. To walk as a free person means to pull your consciousness entirely out of the virtual future and distribute it throughout the soles of your feet. As you take a single step forward, you become intensely aware of the complex biomechanical miracle of your movement. You feel the heel of your foot making contact with the earth, the gradual shifting of your body weight across the arch, the pressure building upon the ball of your foot, and the final, firm push-off from the toes. You synchronize your footsteps with the natural, unforced rhythm of your breathing. Perhaps you take 2 steps for the duration of an inhalation, and 3 steps for the duration of an exhalation. With each step, you mentally say to yourself, "Arrived home." This is not a mechanical mantra, it is an acknowledgement of a profound existential reality. You are arriving in the only place where your life actually occurs, the here and now. You are refusing to sprint through your days to reach a future moment of completion. You recognize that the very ground beneath your feet is a sacred domain, and that the simple capacity to walk upon this earth in physical health, surrounded by the vivid colors of the sky, the architecture of the trees, and the atmosphere of the world is an extraordinary wonder. You walk not to get somewhere else, but to celebrate the fact that you are already where you need to be, alive, present, and completely free within your own skin. 3. Deconstructing the bells of mindfulness. To sustain this quality of awareness in a world explicitly designed to fragment your attention, you must strategically install practical reminders, what Buddhist tradition calls bells of mindfulness, directly into your daily environment. Historically, in traditional monastic settings, a large, resonant bronze bell would be struck at irregular intervals throughout the day. The moment the deep, echoing sound reverberated across the monastery grounds, every individual, whether they were digging in the agricultural fields, preparing food in the kitchen, or copying sacred texts, would instantly freeze. They would drop their tools, cease their conversations, and completely quiet their analytical minds. They would follow 3 cycles of mindful breathing, returning their scattered awareness to the immediate reality of the present moment before slowly resuming. Many contemporary individuals have adopted the practice of programming subtle, organic digital chimes into their computers or smartphones to sound automatically every 15 or 30 minutes. When the gentle sound chimes in the middle of a frantic workday, it acts as an unyielding, compassionate intervention. It is a command to step out of the automated tech trance. The moment the chime sounds, freeze. You cease your typing, pause your reading, and take your hands away from your input devices. Soften. You become somatic. You check in with your physical body, allowing your shoulders to instantly drop away from your ears, your jaw to unclench, and the tension around your eyes to completely dissolve. Breathe. You follow 3 deep, unhurried, and fully conscious cycles of inhalation and exhalation, anchoring your awareness in the physical movement of your lungs. Smile. You offer a soft internal smile to your own consciousness, acknowledging the beautiful wonder of your immediate existence, completely independent of your professional productivity. Resume. You slowly return to your tasks from a state of grounded alignment and internal clarity. By implementing these small, sacred clearings throughout your day, you systematically prevent the accumulation of nervous exhaustion and psychological fragmentation. You break the linear momentum of the stress response, ensuring that even in the midst of a highly demanding modern career, you remain the absolute sovereign of your own attention, deeply rooted in the unshakable island of your own self, tending the inner house, navigating difficult emotions. 1. Reframing loneliness from enemy to teacher. When an individual commits to this radical turn inward and begins to cultivate the silence of the present moment, they will inevitably encounter the raw, unedited emotional climate of their own inner world. For many of us, this initial confrontation is deeply uncomfortable. The moment the digital noise is silenced, the underlying feelings of loneliness, sorrow, insignificance, and existential anxiety, which we have spent years carefully numbing through continuous consumption, rise up with immense, intimidating force. The immediate instinct of the untrained mind is to panic, to declare that the practice is failing, and to instantly flee back to the safety of the screen. Buddhist psychology offers an entirely different, counterintuitive approach to these difficult emotional landscapes. It asks us to undergo a profound cognitive reframing, to stop treating our loneliness as a catastrophic defect, and to begin welcoming it as our wisest, most uncompromising teacher. Your loneliness is not an accidental glitch in your psychological hardware. It is a highly sophisticated, deeply intelligent guidance system. Just as physical pain is an indispensable biological indicator that alerts you when your physical body has suffered an injury or is in contact with fire, emotional pain is an indicator that alerts you when your lifestyle is out of alignment with your true spiritual needs. When you sit in a crowded room full of digital connections and feel a profound sense of isolation, Your loneliness is not lying to you, it is giving you completely accurate information. It is telling you that the environment you are inhabiting is offering nothing more than empty, calorie-synthetic simulations of relationship that cannot touch the deep, biological need for authentic, vulnerable intimacy. When you scroll through social feeds for 2 hours and feel an acute, hollow ache in your core, your loneliness is acting as a faithful protector. It is protesting against the systematic hollowing out of your life. It is trying to wake you up from the narcotic trance of digital consumption, delivering a persistent message. This way does not lead home. What you are seeking cannot be found out there. Turn the light of your awareness around and look within. When you stop fighting your loneliness and begin to appreciate its profound intelligence, its entire structure changes. It ceases to be an oppressive enemy trying to destroy you and becomes a compassionate, internal compass gently guiding your awareness back to the only place where true nourishment can be found, your own immediate presence, to the dialogue of tender recognition. Once we have reframed our relationship with our difficult emotions, we must learn the specific, practical methodology for interfacing with them when they arise. We do not attempt to conquer them through sheer willpower, nor do we try to rationalize them away through intellectual analysis. Instead, we approach them with the exact same quality of gentle, unconditional warmth that a loving parent offers to a child who has awakened in the middle of the night from a terrifying nightmare. This process requires you to initiate a profound, highly specific internal dialogue of tender recognition. The moment you feel the heavy contraction of loneliness or anxiety settling into your chest, you do not reach for your device to numb it. You pause, take a deep conscious breath, drop your awareness directly into the physical location of the feeling, and mentally speak to the emotion. You say to it with absolute sincerity, "Hello, my dear loneliness. I know you are there. I see you clearly, and I am not going to run away from you anymore. I am home now, and I am here to take care of you." This practice is deeply revolutionary. It completely cuts the legs out from under the cycle of emotional avoidance. By naming the state and welcoming it into the clearing of your awareness, you instantly transform your relationship to it. You are no longer the helpless victim of a terrifying emotional storm. You are the vast, stable, and compassionate container within which the storm is safely passing. You offer your loneliness the one thing it has been desperately begging for through all your years of digital distractions: your own unmediated, non-judgmental attention. You allow it to exist within your space, without demanding that it change, without fixing it, and without judging yourself for feeling it. Under the steady warmth of this compassionate gaze, the sharp, hostile edges of the emotion naturally begin to soften, transitioning from a destructive force into a deeply tender, integrated aspect of your own human reality. 3. Healing the wounded inner child. To understand why these emotional states carry such immense, intimidating weight, we must recognize that they are not merely responses to our immediate adult circumstances. They are the ancient repositories of our personal history. Within the psyche of every single adult human being, there exists a highly sensitive, deeply vulnerable layer of awareness, the wounded inner child. This child carries the pristine, unedited memory of every single moment in our past where we felt fundamentally unseen, misunderstood, rejected, or abandoned by those we depended upon for safety. Every time we reach for our digital devices in a state of adult restlessness, compulsively checking for a text or a notification, we are not actually operating from our rational adult ego. We are operating from this wounded inner child. It is the child within us who is terrified of the dark, terrified of being forgotten, and desperately crying out for validation from the digital crowd, hoping that a red notification badge or a comment will finally prove that they are worthy of love and belonging. But because an algorithm is fundamentally incapable of reaching back through time to heal an ancient psychological wound, the child remains permanently starved, driving us to more compulsive behavior. When we practice mindfulness, we finally assume the role of the true, compassionate guardian that this inner child has been waiting for all along. We stop asking the external world to perform a healing task that it cannot execute. We turn our awareness inward. Visualize this vulnerable child residing within the space of our own heart. and mentally wrap our arms around them with unconditional love. We say to them, I see you. I know how long you have been carrying this pain in silence. You no longer have to perform for the crowd to prove your worth. You do not need a single like, a single follow, or anyone else's approval to be legitimate in my eyes. I love you exactly as you are, in your confusion, in your sorrow, and in your absolute simplicity. You are completely safe with me. This internal embrace is not a poetic visualization. It is a profound neurological rewiring of the self. You are leveraging the stability of your adult presence to soothe the ancient hypervigilance of your own developmental wounds, providing yourself with an internal source of validation that can never be modified, revoked, or threatened by the shifting opinions of the external world. Interpersonal metamorphosis, relational fullness over emptiness. 1. The core law of relational depth. As you commit to this inner work and become increasingly established within the sanctuary of the island of self, an extraordinary transformation begins to unfold in the structural architecture of your interpersonal relationships. There is an immutable absolute law of human psychology that our contemporary consumer culture goes to immense lengths to deny. The quality, depth, and integrity of your connection with any other human being will always be directly proportional to the quality, depth, and integrity of your connection with yourself. You are fundamentally incapable of giving to another individual what you have not yet cultivated within your own internal repository. When an individual has not yet learned how to sit peacefully with their own consciousness, when they are terrified of the silence of their own mind and running from the disarray of their inner house, every relationship they initiate will inevitably become an act of desperate emotional extraction. They will approach their romantic partners, their friends, and their family members not out of a clean desire to see and love them, but out of an unconscious impulse to use them as a psychological drug to numb their own internal discomfort. They look to the other person to fill the vast, aching void in their chest, demanding that they continuously provide validation, reassurance, and distraction. This dynamic creates an immensely fragile, exhausting, and ultimately toxic architecture within our relationships. The other person intuitively senses the heavy weight of this unspoken demand. They feel the grasping, clinging energy of your gaze, realizing that you are not actually interested in the raw reality of who they are. You are merely interested in the emotional services they can render to your ego. It makes them feel objectified, pressured, and structurally unsafe, causing them to instinctively close their hearts and pull back to maintain their own sovereignty. When they inevitably fail to satisfy your insatiable internal hunger, because no human being can ever serve as a permanent solution to another person's self-abandonment, you experience a wave of resentment, declaring that they do not love you enough, and plunging back into the digital network to find a fresh source of temporary validation. 2. The non-demanding gaze of compassion. The moment you break this cycle by establishing your residence on the island of self, your relationships are entirely liberated from the mechanics of extraction, because you have done the deep, courageous work of coming home to yourself, because you know how to breathe through your own loneliness, soothe your own anxieties, and tend to your own inner child. You no longer arrive at the doorstep of another human being in a state of emotional starvation. You arrive in a state of radical, self-contained fullness. You possess an internal sanctuary that satisfies your fundamental need for safety and worth, meaning you no longer need to leverage the other person to feel okay about your own existence. This shift entirely redefines the nature of your human gaze. Your eyes transition from eyes of grasping to eyes of compassion. When you look at your partner, your child, or your friend from this grounded center, your look is entirely non-demanding. It does not carry an implicit transactional request. Validate me, approve of me, make me feel less lonely. Instead, your presence transforms into a pure, immaculate mirror that reflects their own inherent beauty back to them without distortion. You become capable of holding space for them with total, unstaged devotion. If they are having a difficult day, if they are trapped in their own anger or confusion, you do not react with defensive panic or a desperate need to fix their emotional state to preserve your own comfort. You rest firmly in your own stability, anchoring the room with your calm, non-reactive presence. allowing them to safely navigate their own emotional storms within the protective harbor of your non-judgmental attention. You offer them the single rarest and most precious commodity available in our contemporary world. The experience of being truly seen, deeply understood, and entirely accepted for exactly who they are, without having to perform or edit their reality to earn your love. 3. Constructing the collective home. This individual realization eventually matures into a shared relational reality that Thich Nhat Hanh beautifully designated as the collective home. A true, authentic relationship is not an alliance of two half-people trying to complete each other through mutual dependence. It is the sacred intersection of two individuals who have each discovered their own internal wholeness, choosing to share the beautiful abundance of their lives within a unified space. When two individuals come together from this foundation of internal sovereignty, they build a relational architecture that is incredibly resilient, spacious, and profoundly deep. Consider the core attributes of the collective home: the extermination of performance. Within this space, there is zero need for the maintenance of a digital persona or an idealized adult facade. Both participants feel a profound, unshakable safety to lay down their armor, expose their wounds, and reveal their messy, confused, and deeply human realities without the fear of judgment or rejection. The power of shared silence. The relationship is no longer dependent on continuous entertainment, verbal noise, or external stimulation. Two individuals can sit in the same room for hours in total, comfortable silent zone reading a book, the other watching the rainfully connected through the deep, subterranean current of their shared presence, their nervous systems co-regulating in a state of absolute peace. Conflict as curiosity. When misunderstandings or conflicts inevitably arise, they are not treated as existential emergencies that threaten the survival of the bond. Because neither person's sense of worth is dependent on being right, they approach the friction with gentle curiosity, leveraging mindful speech and deep listening to understand the underlying pain of the other person, transforming the conflict into a direct doorway toward greater intimacy. This collective home serves as an extraordinary sanctuary, an oasis of authentic human sanity in a desert of digital abstraction. It provides a stable, unshakable foundation from which both individuals can venture out into the world to complete their creative work, manage their professional callings, and serve their communities, knowing that they possess an absolute, invariant harbor of unconditional safety and love to return to at the end of every day. Societal resonance. The individual as the matrix of cultural awakening. 1. The myth of fragmented social progress. In our hyper-connected contemporary culture, we are intensely preoccupied with the concepts of social change, community development, and political overhaul. We live in a state of perpetual collective urgency, flooding our digital platforms with massive cascades of activist commentary, ideological disputes, and structural critiques. We believe instinctively that if we can just modify the external systems of our world, rewrite the policies, optimize the digital algorithms, and convince the opposing political faction of their moral errors, we will finally establish a harmonious, peaceful civilization where human suffering and isolation are eliminated. Buddhist psychology exposes this external obsession as a tragic structural illusion. A society is not an independent, abstract entity that exists separate from the human beings who populate it. A society is nothing more than a macro projection, a collective amplification of the internal psychological state of its individual members. If the vast majority of individuals within a culture are existing in a state of profound internal fragmentation, if they are running from their own minds, neglecting their inner houses, acting out from unhealed childhood wounds, and trapped in compulsive loops of digital validation seeking, is a mathematical impossibility to construct a peaceful, harmonious external society. The chaos, greed, aggression, and systemic isolation that we witness in our public spheres are simply the inevitable outward manifestations of the untended psychological disarray residing within our individual hearts. Any attempt to reform a society through external political or technical manipulation, while completely ignoring the internal landscape of the self, is fundamentally doomed to failure. It is equivalent to meticulously polishing the exterior glass of a mirror while expecting the reflection inside to change. 2. The absolute sovereign force of embodied peace. Therefore, the most radical, effective, and generous act a human being can perform for the sake of the world is to take absolute, unyielding responsibility for the quality of their own internal consciousness. When you choose to sit down mindfully, quiet the digital noise, and step onto the island of self, you are not engaging in a selfish retreat from the social obligations of your era. You are executing the ultimate form of social service. You are introducing a clean, uncontaminated element into the poisoned psychological matrix of our civilization. Your internal peace is not a private luxury, it is a radiant, highly contagious physical and spiritual frequency that transforms the energetic atmosphere of every environment you enter. Human beings possess deep networks of mirror neurons that are constantly scanning the emotional states of those around them for cues of safety or danger. When you walk into a high-stress workplace, a chaotic family gathering, or a tense community meeting completely grounded in your own immediate presence, with your breathing slow, your shoulders dropped, your mind free from narrative reactivity, your peace naturally ripples outward, down-regulating the hypervigilance of every nervous system in the room. You do not need to deliver a patronizing lecture, broadcast an inspiring social media post, or convert anyone to a specific philosophical doctrine. The simple, silent embodiment of your clarity is more powerful than any rhetorical argument. People are instinctively drawn to your presence because you offer them the rarest sanctuary available in the modern world. A human being who is completely at peace with their own existence, who needs absolutely nothing from them in order to be secure, and who radiates an atmosphere of unstaged safety and compassion. By healing yourself, you systematically contribute to the healing of the entire human collective. 3. Reclaiming the miracles of the unmediated universe. This deep homecoming culminates in a radical, sensory awakening to the pristine wonders of the physical universe that surrounds us. When we live our lives trapped within the virtual parameters of the digital machine, our senses become deeply dulled, grayed out by the constant glare of artificial pixels and the hyperstimulation of automated data streams. We walk past the absolute miracles of natural reality without ever truly registering their existence. The practice of mindfulness strips away this digital cataract, returning our vision to a state of pristine, childlike clarity. When you step out of the tech trance and fully inhabit your immediate senses, the ordinary world erupts into an unimaginable gallery of deep spiritual healing. You look up at the vast canopy of the afternoon sky, and instead of treating it as a brief weather update, you are struck with awe by the infinite gradations of its deep blue hue and the majestic, slow movement of the clouds. You step into a forest, and your senses are flooded by the rich fragrance of damp earth, the rustle of leaves dancing in the wind, and the delicate patterns of light filtering through the trees. You realize that these natural phenomena are not inert, boring backdrops. They are immense, living systems vibrating with the energy of creation, possessing a profound, innate power to heal and settle your nervous system if you are simply present enough to receive them. You look at your own physical body, the intricate architecture of your hands, the silent efficiency of your lungs, the unprompted fidelity of your beating heart, and you are overwhelmed with gratitude for the absolute miracle of your biological existence. You recognize that you do not need to continuously look for meaning, validation, or entertainment on a digital screen. You already reside within the middle of a magnificent cosmic masterpiece. You are a localized point of the universe itself, awakening to its own beauty through the simple, silent, and revolutionary act of breathing. Conclusion: the final awakening to our invariant wholeness. 1. The transmutation of the signal. We arrive at the conclusion of this extensive exploration, at the ultimate spiritual realization of the path, the complete alchemical transmutation of our human loneliness. Throughout our lives, we have been conditioned by a deeply confused culture to perceive our loneliness as a source of immense shame, a terrifying defect that proves we are fundamentally broken, unlovable, or excluded from the warmth of life. We have spent decades running from this feeling, deploying every tool of modern technology to drown out its voice and avoid its presence. But when you bring the steady, compassionate light of your own mindfulness directly into the core of this emotional contraction, the ancient illusion entirely dissolves. You discover that your loneliness was never an enemy trying to destroy you. It was your most loyal, unyielding guide. It was the voice of your deepest sanity, refusing to let you settle for the superficial simulations of a digitalized culture. It was an alarm sounding in the dark, trying to pull your awareness away from the distractions of the screen and direct it back to the sacred territory of your own heart. When touched by pure, non-judgmental presence, your loneliness sheds its painful, heavy armor and reveals its true internal essence. You realize that the emptiness you felt was not an absence of other people, it was an absence of yourself. It was the spaciousness of your own unedited consciousness, waiting patiently for you to lay down your performance and return home. The moment you step onto the island of self and embrace this internal space with absolute kindness, your loneliness is completely transformed into the brilliant gold of true solitude. It ceases to be isolation and becomes a domain of absolute freedom, deep self-sufficiency, and unshakable inner peace. 2. The simple revolutionary return. This profound spiritual evolution does not culminate in a grandiose, dramatic display of enlightenment that elevates you above the ordinary realities of human life. The ultimate maturity of the path is characterized by an exquisite simplicity. It returns you to the ordinary moments of your daily life with an entirely transformed heart. Everything we have mapped out across these thousands of phrases, the systemic critique of our modern digital landscapes, the complex neurobiology of compulsive distraction, the ancient psychology of the hungry ghosts, the anatomy of the conscious breath, and the construction of the collective home finds its ultimate, practical realization in the next microscopic second of your life. It is as close, as simple, and as immediate as your very next breath. Right now, wherever your physical body is currently positioned on this planet, whether you are commuting home from a demanding day, sitting at a desk surrounded by the humming machinery of a modern office, or resting in the quiet space of your room, you possess the absolute freedom to execute this gentle revolution. You can choose to step out of the automated stream of the digital world. You can allow your eyelids to drop, let your shoulders drop away from your ears, release the micro-expressions of stress from your face, and gently place one palm over the center of your chest. Feel the steady, faithful thump of your physical heart, a brilliant biological miracle that has been keeping you alive since you were inside the dark of your mother's womb, asking for absolutely nothing in return. Draw air into your nostrils. Watch with unbroken, tender awareness as your lungs expand. Pause at the apex of the breath, resting in the absolute silence of existence. Release the air slowly, completely, allowing every remaining drop of narrative stress and digital anxiety to drain out of your biological form down into the earth beneath you. In this single, unstaged, and profoundly simple act of presence, you have successfully shattered the chains of your conditioning. You are no longer a hungry ghost chasing reflections across a glass screen. You have reclaimed your attention, reintegrated your soul, and arrived safely on the immovable island of your own being. You are completely whole, you are beautifully alive, and you are finally truly home.